Welcome to today's episode of the Tower at UNN once again, our esteemed viewers. My name is Dr. Juko, your host and presenter of this show. It has been a long week as we go through a lot of stuff, and actually, we are here today once again, as usual, to discuss some outstanding trending issues within the week. I am so privileged tonight that I have with me in the studio Mr. Kisitu, the teacher, as well as an analyst. Mr. Kisitu, you are welcome to this show. Have a greet to our viewers, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, the moderator. I hope to have a nice time with all our viewers. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much. With me once again, I have Desire, the analyst, as usual. Desire, can you greet our viewers, please?
Thank you so much, Dr. Juko. And as always, I'm so happy to be here and thankful and grateful. And hopefully today we get onto our discussion, to something fruitful. And a good evening to everyone.
Yes, a good evening to everyone. And actually, we are having a lot of issues that have trended this week. Desire, can you go us through some of those issues that you think have been so pertinent in trending around in Uganda?
So today I prepared 3 things about some of the trending issues that we've had this week, but of course have trended over time. Firstly, I'd like to start off with the government shut down 54 NGOs in total, and most of these NGOs that were actually shut down are all NGOs that their purpose was to fight for human rights. Some of the NGOs were working in regards to people who are being evacuated from land because of the crude mining that the government is doing without informing the people, which is not fruitful to the people, but only serves a few people in parliament. So that's number 1 on my list. All the NGOs who have been doing work towards the fighting for human rights of Ugandan people that are local, these are grassroots organizations, have been shut down by the government due to non-compliance, but it's not clear about what they have been non-compliant about. And most of this, it's due to, we all can see that it's political persecution, and these NGOs had put a lot of pressure on the current regime to deliver as it comes to delivering to the people. Hence, it is not a surprise that the regime has gone ahead and shut it down. And number 2 on the list is the refugees, and Uganda agreeing to temporarily host 2,000 refugees from the unrolling situation that is happening right now in Afghanistan, whereby America lied to the world that it was going into Afghanistan for humanitarian reasons. And 2 decades after, we're finding out it was never for humanitarian reasons, but actually enabled war. So hence the Taliban takeover that we're seeing right now in our era. And Uganda has agreed to host 2,000 to sanitize its image, since Uganda has been sanitizing its image, not Uganda, but this regime, with being the regime that will take in refugees and is this refugee haven or Mecca. So once again, we see Uganda in this position whereby it's wanting to act like the refugee Mecca, yet the people in Uganda still are succumbed to to a lot of human rights abuses, a lot of disservice, under-delivery, and misleadership. And then lastly, on the list of one of the trending issues, of course, is the generals that we've seen drop this week. First was General Kutesa, who died, and at his burial, we had about the death of Paul Lokech, who was serving as Inspector General of the police. And let's we not forget his words. He said, "Prepare your wills and coffins before you come to the streets." And just like that, I hope that he had prepared his will and coffin, because he apparently died of a blood clot, allegedly, from falling from a chair. So once again, someone is playing Kanemu Kanabiri, and we're seeing generals drop left, right, and center. And let's not forget the violence and the words that were said, and that are representational of this institute. So as we continue, as we continue to move on, let's not, the cleanup that is happening with major figures that came out and said such hurtful words to the population after the November killings. Let's not forget that these members actually enabled and helped with the killings and what happened during the protests in November. And we're seeing these people drop one by one. So in general, that's most of the news about the trending issues that have been happening this week. And then just a mention, the UK had decided to donate more AstraZeneca to Uganda vaccinations, and we're yet to see how that will roll out, how the population will be informed, and how the government is going to handle this, and if at any point in time our Ministry of Health is actually functional.
Thank you very much, Desire. Thank you very much. We have a technical problem with Mr. Kisitu, and we're trying to get him back, but I think we can get him by audio, though we have lost his picture. Mr. Kisitu, do you hear us? Are you able to hear us? Yes, I think we have lost him as of now. We shall try to engage the technical team to make sure that they get him as well. Desire, there is a very interesting week, has been a very interesting week today. I mean, this week has been having a lot of issues, as I've mentioned. And one of them that has really brought a lot of people's attention is the death of so many, I mean, the two military officers, and one which was so abrupt. He was found dead in the morning. That has been a shock to the entire Uganda community. How's your reaction when you heard about that? What was your reaction?
One thing that the NRM regime has done and has perfected is the death of a socially known figure tends to cover up the death of so many common people and so many stories that are newsworthy. So let's not forget that not only in November did a lot of Ugandans succumb to their death, but also at the start of this year during the election ruckus and the election conferences, so many young people died. So for me, hearing that General Lokech succumbed to his death, first of all, was not very surprising. For people must live and die. We all must die. But also another thing, it was, we must not forget the words and what he represented to the Ugandan masses. And then also one thing that we ignore is he had access to so many privileges that Ugandans do not have due to the disservice of this regime. And number three was his death is not going to cover up the purpose of our revolution, which is a people's revolution. And we shall not even waste 3, 4, or 5, even half a tear on him succumbing to death. For we must return to the Lord. If he has returned to answer to his sins, so be it. But that brought no surprise. That was not news. That was not newsworthy. And we're still demanding for police officials like him who murdered Ugandans to pay for what they did. And we're still looking for the restoration of that sanity in our country, as the institution of police and military still represent violence. So in general and in short, that's all I have to say about him succumbing to death. It was not a surprise, and his death will not cover up the realities that Ugandans face due to the violence that he actually took out on Ugandans.
Thank you very much. I think we've picked Mr. Kisitu. Mr. Kisitu, do you hear us now?
I'm getting you very well.
Yes, sorry, we have lost you in the picture, but I think if we can get the voice, that's very important. Would you please give us your week surprises? What are the training issues for you in the week as we try to, put ourselves in a discussion of today?
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. In due respect of our viewers in Uganda, I cannot start to speak without talking about the release of Uganda Advanced Certificate of Education results for 2020. I cannot begin my speech without talking about that. On Friday, we had the release of those results. Though we have a very big decline in the number of candidature, but those who sat for the USE, they got their results. Then the other is about the great, what is actually transpiring everywhere in Uganda. Everyone is talking about the Uganda losing almost a decade of we're actually expecting a high number of ignorant people in Uganda as is out of the lockdown, which has affected greatly the institutions. Then the other, that the country is almost discussing about the impact of COVID-19 on the private institutions in Uganda. I cannot also end without talking about the issue of the death of Major General Lokech, Deputy Inspector General of Police. Everyone is shocked, and we have a lot of questions about that. Thank you so much, the moderator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kisitu. In Uganda, let's start our discussion with the president's speech, in which he made a twisted turn by condemning security brutality and abuse of human rights. Mr. Museveni said that he will prosecute security forces accused of abuse. Describing his security officers as lazy, Museveni said in an interview, an address on Saturday night, that he wanted to discuss human rights concerns in that presentation. Mr. Museveni warned security forces against barking at or beating suspects, detaining suspects for a long period in jail, and reporting foreigners without trial, saying it disadvantages the country. Here is something that we need to analyze seriously, and we also want to know exactly why do you think it comes at this particular time, when everybody is looking at various issues. Is it a diversion? Is he doing it for the sake of for the good of the nation? Desire, I would like you to come in and try to analyze this. What's your take on this?
First of all, in regards to this issue, is this speech was given last week, and we have to look at all the factors that are into play for Uganda now. Firstly, Uganda had been, we forget that Museveni still has to sanitize his image and give legitimacy to his presidency, because this is something that has not been done yet. This is something that is still lacking. So for a nation that is going to receive 2,000 refugees from Afghanistan, human rights, the upholding of human rights should be one of the primary prerequisites of actually being able to receive refugees. That's number one, who are coming due to and I put this in quote, because they're coming from a place whereby the assumption is that, and I say assumption because some of the facts, the assumption is that they are running away from human rights abuses and they're looking for countries whereby they can seek refuge for where their human rights will be respected. So why does Museveni come out and sanitize Uganda's image in terms of respecting of human rights abuses? But also the interesting bit about his speech was the confusion. It seems like Museveni has not been living in Uganda for the past, I don't know how many years. The confusion and the ease at which he does speak about the police should not beat, shout at people, arrest people. And this also, we must remember, comes after BBC did a documentary about November, because Museveni did talk about the stray bullets, and he asked a very important question that we all were asking, is who were these stray bullets meant to hit in the first place? They should have never even been bullets. So the word diversion has been overused, outused, and exhausted at this point in time. We're living in a country whereby lies are just told, and we should expect our government to lie to us, to make up stories, to build stories, to hold on to power. The regime is weak. and cannot handle the pressure that is being put on them by the truth itself shouting at its face. Therefore, they come out and pretend to say the truth and pretend to be part of the truth and make up lies. Even in just Museveni's recollection about what happened in the Bush War, you can see the trajectory of a liar, whereby he will tell you a story and not be able to reference the names of the people who are in that story apart from himself. So we're seeing lie after lie being told, whereby at this point calling it a diversion takes away from the responsibility of this government to be truthful and deliver to its people, whereby now it can all be put on the police that they are shooting and killing people and torturing people, and not on the institution, which is the government, that allows for an institution that's a part of it, which is the police and the army, to be brutal and to be violent to its people, because those checks and balances are not there because the order comes from above. So what we're seeing is Ugandans must, as Ugandans, is we're seeing a regime that is trying to hold on, change the narrative, create a different story for its survival through lies, and that's what we keep seeing on replay. And these lies just create a lot of ironies, where you have Museveni pretending not to know that this was actually happening in the country, of which it was, and of which he was there, and of which he was still president, and of which it even served for him to continue his presidency. Let us not forget that the acts of the military and the police helped Museveni to drag out his regime to today and to now. It benefited the Museveni regime.
Oh, thank you very much. Again, Desire, do you think the president was expressing his real feeling about the people, or he was trying to put it in terms of the international relations? Because it seems like sometimes he could do things depending on what the international organizations or international countries are forcing him to do. Would you think it was his personal feeling as he mentioned it out?
I'm sorry to laugh, but I do not think that Museveni has any personal feeling or feels like there's any personal responsibility for him towards the people, especially towards Uganda. And I'll just give an example from that speech that could be, and this is just one example that could highlight how much love Museveni has. I think this was something that is being asked from Museveni, from his masters, which is, because clearing up Uganda's image, it doesn't help Uganda. It helps Museveni and his bosses for Uganda to have a good image internationally. So I do think that this came from the people, from, of course, the imperialists that he works with, for Museveni to have a cleaner image, or Uganda to have a better image, because they've been trying to sanitize Uganda's image. We all remember the MTV awards. We all remember Akon coming to Uganda, and this being broadcasted on a news network all the way in the US. We are now seeing when the Taliban's take over, Uganda is receiving refugees, hence the pressure to come out and give speeches as this. But for the example that I was going to use is, Museveni was talking about the arrest and the torture of the suspects, the alleged suspects in the killing of General Katumba Wamala's daughter in his alleged attempted murder. But Museveni said, and these are his words, they killed 2 of our children. But Museveni managed to mention Dr. Katumba Wamala's daughter's name, Brenda, which he knew, but could not mention the name of the driver, and referred to that as one of his children, and nationhood, countryhood, part of him, but does not even remember the name. This just shows the lack of care that he has towards this case, not remembering the name of the driver, not remembering even just something as the name of the driver, so that his name is not remembered and his life was lost in that. And that just showed how much care is there, and how, again, we go back to this idea of when someone who is big in society, allegedly big in society, comes from a place of status, we remember that person. Whereas when the common people are succumbed to the same violence, they are not remembered, swept under the rug, and ignored. Museveni managed to use him as an example, but could not remember his name. So I do not think Museveni cares for the common people. I do not think there's a profound love for Ugandans. I do not think that he did it off of his own will. I think this is a project to sanitize Uganda, to make sure that Uganda remains the beacon of peace in East Africa, and that Museveni has brought that peace. They're trying to regenerate this image, but we're living in an era whereby we're informed enough to know that this image is inexistent, has never existed, and only worked in the benefit of exploitation of our nation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let me go to Mr. Kisitu. Mr. Kisitu, when you hear what Desire says, it seems like the president's address concerning the brutality of the army and all the security forces is just uses as an imagery of what is trying to cover up and making himself look clear in the eyes of the international organizations and international and other countries which possibly help Uganda to get some funds. Would you please also express your analogy on this? Yes, Mr. Kisitu. Your network seems to be at the edge. Do you hear us?
Getting it right.
Yes. I'm saying that the president seems to have used that platform to talk about or condemning the security brutality as a matter of trying to paint a picture that he matters. He thinks much about human rights, and yet when you look at the inner part of him, the empathy is not there, and he's trying just to paint a picture to international governments. What's your take on that?
Yeah, thank you so much, the moderator. I'd like to inform the world today that the speech that President of the Republic of Uganda made, in fact, it was not intended to cater for the Ugandans. It was a document which was presented to him by someone such that he can read it. By following up what President Museveni always presents to Ugandans, is see him acting and even putting in the proverbs that are clearly known in Uganda. But in the document that he read, by the time he was addressing the nation, the previous address, even the proverbs that we had were in the document, written, well typed. So it was a document which was given to him to be presented to the Ugandans. Still, we ask ourselves, for very many times, Ugandans have been abused. For very many times, there has been a lot of making a common Ugandan suffer. Why is it that he has not been coming up to communicate with the Ugandans? Why is he coming up right now when the refugees, when he's trying to call the refugees to come in Uganda as a result of them being given asylum? Still the other, we have had a lot of things happening in Uganda, and no one has been caring. Very many innocent Ugandans have been killed. Very many people have lost their lives. But in the process of them losing lives, we have seen the president actually thanking the police for the very good work done. Even the people who are not recognized as policemen, as peacekeepers in Uganda, I'm referring to those who always put on those the unauthorized wearings that they always put on. They always come up and beat up Uganda. We have seen these drones coming up in the country, doing a lot of brutality, committing a lot of unwanted things to the common Ugandans. And the gentleman has not always been coming up. The question is, what forced him to come up to give the speech of that time? Still, to make analysis about the speech, always President Museveni is known for making a speech of over 3 hours. But this time around, the speech was summarized. It was within the limited period of time possible. And the gentleman was just reading papers. Therefore, it was not intended to care for the common Ugandan. There is a lot of force behind the president of Uganda, most especially from the international bodies. By having that force, they actually would think that he was sent that document by someone to make sure that he reads that. Still there is no any move that the government will make without having any financial benefit behind it. It is not there. And just to know that the reading his address of the previous address is intended to receiving those refugees in Uganda with the financial benefits attached. Receiving them in Uganda would be so fine. But what is the relationship between Uganda and Afghanistan? Afghanistan, we have seen people in Uganda being killed, and they claim that they are members, they are terrorists, and we know Afghanistan being affected by Afghanistan. How sure that if we do this, the relationship between Uganda and Afghanistan will not be distorted? How sure are we that if we provide asylum for those 2,000 refugees that they are planning, Uganda is going to be safe? And I know we have not been so much safe, but I think that if this thing is not well calculated, we will worsen the more. Still, the other question we will ask, why would you give a lot of attention to the refugees than giving the attention to the nationals in Uganda? The nationals are suffering. The nationals are experiencing poor education, poor health facilities, poor infrastructures, and you're trying to make sure that you bring in other more people to give them more attention. The other thing I'll talk about, Mr. Moderator, is that Uganda has always been receiving refugees from Congo, refugees from Sudan, and they have always been coming in Uganda with their effects. The cholera from their side, the Ebola from the other side of Congo, and it also affects Ugandans. What assurance are they giving us that if we happen to receive those refugees they are talking about, that we shall be safe as the nationals in Uganda? Still, things come in the country to divert us from what is very important. Today, I don't know. What is important in Uganda is the issue of educating the children of the country. Younger girls have gotten pregnant. Younger boys are not having that feeling of going back to school, which Uganda are we supposed to have tomorrow. Ugandans have been started to put the government on pressure such that they could look at the issue of education as being so much pertinent and important. And now the issue of refugees is coming in to cover up the other that is on high globe. Still, looking at the issue of refugees coming in Uganda, if we have been very much observant towards how towards the speeches of the president, after his speech, you expect the killing of a very important person in the country. So, what is the essence behind all these things? I would tell you this, that the refugees coming in Uganda, President Museveni is trying to inform the international world that Uganda is very safe to receive and accommodate every other person, such that he can keep himself into power after him showing up to the world that is a person who loves international peace. Yet, in the house, at home in Uganda, peace is not there. People are suffering. I beg to submit that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chisitu. Let me ask the moderator to play for us, and we understand the video so that we can be able to understand exactly the issue of the Taliban and the issue of the country of Afghanistan. Let's have that break as we play the video, and then we shall start from there. The moderator, the producer, my producer.
Obama team rallied all of this anger and outrage at the Lord's Resistance Army for their atrocity. Well, the big kicker to the story is that the Obama team rallied all of this anger and outrage at the Lord's Resistance Army for their atrocities. in support of the US-backed Ugandan army that was carrying out the same kinds of war crimes, including mass rape and massacres of civilians, under the command of one of the world's longest-serving dictators, American puppet General Museveni. The US never cared about his atrocities, like the 2016 massacre he ordered of an entire village, where his soldiers executed 15 children, or about the fact that, like Joseph Kony, General Museveni himself came to power by, ding ding ding, using child soldiers. That top US ally just massacred 54 unarmed protesters in November 2020 with bullets supplied by the Pentagon. It's a stunning story, and probably one you've never heard of, because it wasn't considered worthy of coverage in US media. 54 protesters mowed down by a government completely supported by Washington, and at a protest that was demanding nothing more than a democratic election. The exact framing the US uses to justify coups, sanctions, and invasions all over the world. Uganda has been one of those key client states that can act on behalf of US imperialism instead of the US having to send its own military. For example, Uganda is a key base of support for corporate control of the Congo, among the most coveted countries in Africa for its mountain of resources. And both saw Uganda lead the charge for US intervention. First in Somalia, where Uganda invaded in 2007 under US command. And second in Sudan, where Uganda played a major role in the US desired division of the nation into two separate countries. That's how South Sudan was created in 2011, home to 70% of Sudan's oil. But Uganda has also proved its loyalty to the US empire outside of Africa too. Like, you probably didn't know that Uganda sent around 10,000 soldiers to Iraq in 2006 to help the US fight and occupy the country.
Thank you very much. Desire, the video is trying to emphasize how brutality, the brutality of the regime and extension of its brutality all over other parts of especially the Great Lake region. And this brings us to another topic, the topic of sending the army to Somalia as a peace force or keeping force. Uganda currently has has most of the African Union peacekeepers in Somalia, that is AMISOM, with about 6,223 soldiers deployed in that country. And that is Uganda is followed by Burundi with 5,432, Ethiopia 4,395, Kenya 3,664, and Djibouti 2,000. And according to the report, Uganda has lost 110 soldiers in the conflict in Somalia. This is something which is very, very interesting. And actually, when you look at data, it indicates that the president is always on a high, pursuit of sending more troops in Somalia because it involves more of humanitarian or peacekeeping than it involves getting money than peacekeeping as a factor. Let's have a look at that as we try to discuss deeper in that. Desire.
One thing that people need to know is that war is a money-making industry. Wars are not waged out of humanitarian reasons. Wars are not waged out of nation building. We've reached an era and a time whereby, no, from the beginning of the money-making idea, ever since then, wars have been waged to make money out of it, to allow for exploitation, to allow for looting. Through genocide, do populations succumb to an oppressor? It's always through genocide. So whenever we're told that Ugandan soldiers are going for reasons of peacekeeping, the first questions that we should always ask ourselves, why is it in avenues and ways of peacekeeping the military and brute force is needed? But let's expand this a little bit more. Uganda doesn't just send its military to Somalia because that's a neighboring African country that might need help in taking over the government. Uganda has to be ordered by the United States, another big international parties to send its military for a monetary exchange. So this is a transaction. It's a transaction that happens whereby it's not even the interests of the Somali people that is being put first. It's the interests of the American government in Somalia that is being safeguarded and policed by another African nation that's headed by a despot such as Museveni in there, as long as he gets monetary money out of this, and also he gets the guarantee of being kept in power and allowed to do whatever he wants, and even supplied with ammunition to kill people in Uganda. And that is overlooked internationally, since all these international bodies that are meant to police and keep peace in the world are all run by the US, like the Human Rights Watch, the UN, ICC, that's the European Union and the US in charge of that. So the international imperialist power that be, which is the US, Europe, and other nations, make sure that Museveni's violence is not his solely, but it comes through transactions in safeguarding and safekeeping the imperialist empire. This is why you see the Ugandan military all the way in Iraq. Iraq was invaded, and the history behind what happened with Iraq, Iran, and Saddam Hussein, and how that led to his death. These are places where America goes and then decides to start humanitarian wars to safeguard their interests, which is really always minerals and riches. And this, we see the same happening here. But for Uganda, what makes it even very special is Congo is our neighbor. So nothing should come as a surprise. Congo is one of the richest. It's not one of the richest. It's the richest country in the world. Everything is in Congo, from diamonds to gold to oil. And the Congolese people have paid for this in more ways than we can really imagine. Congo built Belgium, and Congo is still building all these first world nations to this day. And the people that make it possible are the Kagames of the world, the Musevenis of the world. These are people that make the exploitation and the mutilation and genocide of African people possible. That's why Museveni gets to kill Ugandans, because he has been helping in systemically displacing, killing, and genocide of other Africans in places where there is resources to be exploited. For example, Sudan and South Sudan broke apart because of what? Because of oil. That's another resource. What happened? We can look at the situation in Somalia and Somaliland as well, and the continued war in that region. We can look at what's happening all over us in the Great Lakes region, but the big elephant in the room will always be what's happening in Congo, because they know with having a client state such as Uganda, our minerals are already being exploited anyway, and that's that's so easy. But they can extend this tyranny to places like that.
Okay, thank you very much, Desire. Thank you, Mr. Kisitu. I wonder whether we have your sound properly.
Yeah.
Mr. Kisitu, are you with us? Yes. I want you to also have a deep dig into the issue of the peacekeeping by Uganda having majority of the soldiers that are in Somalia, and the motive seems to be very, very unreasonable, because when you look at why are they there and why we have all those soldiers dying, or the sons of Uganda dying in such a conflict, we find out that it really is not it's not what we should really pay for that. The deaths of so many people in from our country makes it a very bad deal, and possibly the government of Uganda doesn't look at it from another angle, rather from the monetary point of view. What is your take about this?
Always a group of people that wants to build a dynasty in a given state will always do everything possible to make sure that it scares the rest. By going back down to the history of France, I remember when Louis XVI was the leader of France, he also did what Museveni is doing today. You would see the French soldiers going to Germany. You would see the French soldiers going to America. You would see the French soldiers going to Naples. You would see them going to Italy and everywhere. And Napoleon became everything. The world knows that if they try to read about the European history. Come back to us in Africa here, you'd find out that by the time when we had Libya being the strongest, with one of the most reasonable presidents in the world over, you would see Libya being everywhere, having a lot of investments everywhere, the soldiers being everywhere. Still looking at America, the country that controls everything right now, you would see that everywhere that you're seeing anything to do with profit producing venture, America is there. Everywhere, America is there. You would go to Iraq, America is there. Afghanistan, America is there. Go to Libya, America still is there. Go down this our neighboring country, Congo, America is there. Sudan, America is there. And now look at President Museveni is also everywhere. Even if he's not called, will even try his level best to put in a request, either in writing or a personal request that may come up and I give you a hand. And we have seen Ugandan children, innocent Ugandans dying. We have very many of them, and we have them, and most of those their lives there. We had a lot of them. I still have them in Somalia, and they are losing lives there that side. In Congo, I think what is remaining is just making sure that it becomes Uganda, and Uganda extends those ends of Congo to the extent that we are providing infrastructures in Congo which are not in Uganda. Still, looking at President Museveni controlling almost everything in Africa. I remember when he was campaigning this time around, he was like, I look at all the presidential aspirants not having that very big vision. They don't talk about the East African Federation. They don't talk about that. You see that President Museveni is trying to look at how best can he control East Africa, him being the first president. But is doing that at the expense of the common Ugandan who is suffering. I would say, if we look at the way how those presidents who try to build dynasties within their states, how they ended, they were about Napoleon dying and not even known where he died from. Is it the incident of that has got out of my head? Looking at how Kanuma Gaddafi,
was it Waterloo or?
We had the Battle of Waterloo. Then we had some other. He fought a number of battles. This time around again, we had the one of our own in Africa. Yeah, Kanuma El Gaddafi. Again, how everything ended. Still, we have the one of Uganda. Is forgetting is that Kano, the other side, the other Kano, his friend of the time, they used him, the Americans, and again they overturned against him. And what happened, everyone knows that. Still, is still insisting. So I would say, if you could pick this, let him care about the Ugandans who he claims that they voted for him, such that we can have a very good country. But the issue is, we are going to all of that as the order, a response from America, which wants to control almost the whole world. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Kisitu. We're going to have a short break, and as we come back, we're going to look at the issue of Afghanistan and what we expect from them coming over in Uganda as refugees. So don't go away, keep watching as we try to push ourselves into another segment of this discussion. Remember, we active and live on our social medias, and we hope that those that are ready to help in or give in some of your donations, you can click on, as usual, on the sign of $1, and then you be able to put in the amount of money that you wish to donate to our platform or our television, and we be able to run most of our program. Thank you very much. Let's not go away as we come back. Thank you.
Time takes a toll on everyone, they say. Time is merciless, it won't wait for us to change. Time, I am stressing out. I can't figure out what to say. Oh, time, just give us time. Time, looking back on pictures, and I find it hard to see you and myself in places where we used.
Dr. Andrew Takome Kaira was born on 30th January 1945 in a small town known as Nkokonjeru in the Uganda region. He is regarded as one of Uganda's forgotten heroes, a true nationalist whose love for his country sent him to an early grave. He was a lawyer and professor and had many accomplishments since 1971, with many of his accolades attained from his education and political experiences, both nationally and internationally. Significant is his doctoral dissertation titled Condoism in Uganda, which has awarded him an internationally recognized terminology now used in criminology. He joined several political organizations, including Uganda Freedom Movement, UFM, which he was the leader, the Uganda National Liberation Front, UNLF, later joining the National Resistance Army, NRA, which had once been his organization's rival. Dr. Kaira is regarded as one of Uganda's forgotten heroes, a true nationalist whose love for his country led to his premature death. He was just 46 years old when he was assassinated on 6th March 1987 during a dinner with his close friends and 3 female acquaintances. His killers have never been brought to justice.
Welcome back to the last part of this show as we try to indulge into the discussion of training issues in Uganda. As we go to the last segment of our show, we would like you also to participate in this discussion when the producer will be giving you the number on which you will be calling or be sending your voices to make sure that you take part of this discussion. The last part of it, we're going to discuss about the Afghanistan refugee that we expect in Uganda. Uganda is set to temporarily host Afghani 2,000 refugees following their home country rapid takeover by the Taliban. Uganda hosts more refugees than any other country in Africa, with around 1.5 people having gotten their asylum in Uganda, according to the Nations Commission for Refugees. Most of them come from neighboring countries like Sudan, like Congo, like Somalia, and other related countries. Uganda is known for having friendly policies that give refugees plenty of rights, including education, work, and property ownership. According to the daily newspaper, President Museveni has granted a request by the US to let them stay in Uganda for 3 months. My question will always be, is he doing it for humanitarian good? Let's start the discussion with Desire. Desire, here comes a situation whereby the president is saying, the newspaper, the Daily Monitor said that the president had granted a request from the US for the Afghani 2,000 refugees to come in Uganda, and they say he's doing it for humanitarian, and they say Uganda has the best policies for the refugees because they say that we offer them education and they work, and also owning property. Is the president doing this out of humanitarian motive, or of what motive do you think he's doing this? And what is the implication to the Ugandan?
Mm. One of the things that, again, I must stress upon is that branding is at play here. Uganda has been branded internationally, because it's also, we should listen to what international media is saying about this and what we know to be the truth. We know in Uganda we have a very repressive, a very oppressive, a very violent regime at hand that refuses and latches onto power. International media always, it has popularized the African dictator, where you have Trevor Noah doing skits about the African dictator and Donald Trump being the African dictator. And then you have, so there is this international image that in Africa is the only place you can find dictators. And of course, bad leadership such as Museveni is to be thrown there. So that's not the problem. But Museveni can be good if he owns the paradise for refugees. But then the question is, why do we have so many refugees globally, and why are they coming out of these places and running out of these places? With the issue of the Taliban's and the Taliban's taking over, we see America at front line and center of that. So there is no humanitarian conditions that are guarding or directing Museveni's interests in this. All these are transactions that are done in between the masters of oppression and the people. Uganda is a client state. It's a client to the imperialist powers such as the US, Europe, the UK. We are a client state to them. And the people who head these transactions are that 1%, the leading regime, the Musevenis and whoever is within close relation with Museveni. So there is nothing humanitarian behind this, where you can read something like to be hosted in 5-star hotels, when most of our population, let's talk about some of our traders and what COVID has done to those private businesses and small businesses, of which we know all these malls are still owned by the same people, and people cannot afford to actually stay and hold this. But the government had no subsidies, nothing given to this populace, which is so much of our populace, because most people get their money out of trade and commerce, because Kampala is the central. So again, there is no humanitarian. Museveni is not doing this out of humanitarian reasons. There is none of that helping this. It's the brand that international media has given Museveni and international countries have given Museveni, that Uganda is a refugee paradise, that eases and helps this transaction that is going to lead to monetary gain. So as Ugandans, the question we should be asking ourselves is, why is Museveni looking for more money? And we know what more money in Museveni regime means. More money equals to more extortion, more corruption, mass hiring of mercenaries. So it's to see where that money is going to actually be spent, and we know it's never spent to the benefit of Ugandans, other than it's always spent to the benefit of holding and keeping an iron fist onto power. So we should really, really hold ourselves tight for the drive that comes next, because this transaction is going to lead to monetary gain, which is the one primary reason as to why this is being done, because it will make America, we need to realize that this takes pressure off of America and takes pressure off of European nations to receive Afghani refugees. The primary question we should be asking, why is it that America, the one that started the war 20 years ago in Afghanistan, is not hosting refugees, but helping to give helping with the transaction of refugees to African states such as Uganda for money? That's the question we should be asking ourselves. So it's going to be monetary, but the question we should be asking is, what is Museveni going to use this money for? Because I don't know if he just finished all the COVID money that he got recently. What will this money be used for, actually?
Thank you very much, Desire. Thank you very much. As I bring in Mr. Chisitu, I ask my producer to play for us a video that is trying to show how and what the Afghanistan people are.
When I came into office, I inherited a deal that President Trump negotiated with the Taliban, Under his agreement, U.S. forces would be out of Afghanistan by May 1, 2021. U.S. forces had already drawn down during the Trump administration from roughly 15,500 American forces to 2,500 troops in country. The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. So what's happened? Afghanistan political leaders gave up and fled the country. The Afghan military collapsed, sometime without trying to fight. American troops cannot and should not be fighting in a war and dying in a war that Afghan forces are not willing to fight for themselves. We spent over $1 trillion. We trained and equipped an Afghan military force of some 300,000 strong, incredibly well equipped. We gave them every tool they could need. We paid their salaries. We provided close air support. We gave them every chance to determine their own future. What we could not provide them was the will to fight for that future.
Desire, on that very same page, before I bring in Mr. Kisitu, what is your take from President Biden when he says Americans are not going to fight for countries' wars, rather they help them to sustain wars by themselves? Can you relate that to Ugandan situation in case there is anything that happens?
One thing, all this today's discussion, what it leads to the one main question, and the question that keeps haunting history and history as it plays out, because we are all in the path of history, present, and future. And the one question that keeps on coming back, and that always comes back to us, is the question of self-governance, of dignity, of self-governance, dignity, and sovereignty. This is a question at the center of every political system because of the political history at which nations were formed, because of the history of enslavement, of colonization, and all those things. It's always that question. And the situation in Afghanistan, where you have, why is it, the one question that we haven't asked that is very important, why is it that America is the one country in the world that is allowed to go into another country, put its military there, have a whole military base in the name of peacekeeping? On the African continent, the American military can be found almost everywhere. Let's just take an example of the region we come from, Eastern Africa. Americans in Djibouti, Americans in Kenya, Americans in Somalia. They have military bases all over the place. Americans in Congo. They have the whole area surrounded to keep peace. But why is it that America is the one country in the world that is allowed to get its soldiers, put it in a country to help that country fight its wars? The math behind this does not equate to an answer that is actually deserving of listening to. The problem is the problem that is actually being presented to the masses is people that are living in this country are living in a country that is governed by another country and by the interests of another country, which allows for this militancy and war. Because then the question comes to who is leading in the production of guns, tear gas? Have we even looked at those statistics? Where do our countries buy guns, tear gas, and all those? But where also do the resources that make those products come from? We know those resources come from the African continent, but then who produces them? Because we don't produce them. We're not industrialized to that level. The industries are always offshore, and it's countries such as America or Canada or in Europe that are actually specialized in making ammunition, in making guns. And those things need to be used because of the system that we live in. Hence the militarization and the belief that humanity needs to leave behind a military, and it's a part of our security, but they don't bring security but tyranny. So as I conclude, it's the question is, again, this relationship will always enable other military powers to come into the country and create disorganization, but the burden lies on the people. For example, we've seen what's happened in Afghanistan, we've seen what's happened in Iraq. The Americans were also kicked out of Iraq. There is no place that the Americans have gone to fight a humanitarian war whereby they have actually left off of their own will. They've always been kicked out by the people. And there's no place that they have actually brought peace to, or inspired, like how Biden was saying, inspired the people to fight for their own wars. No. So again, the bigger issue here and the problem that we're facing will always be imperialism, will always be taking out that it's been taken away from us that we can govern ourselves, that we can have our institutions based off of our beliefs, our norms, and how we wish for those institutions to run. We face tyranny which is American imperialism and militancy everywhere, and this leads to the exploitation. And before I conclude, I would like to say that America is just an extension of Europe. Europe is not separate from this. So is Canada. So we have a few class of countries in this world that govern and control how everything runs globally, and it can always only be done through violence. Hence why the military, and we in this era we're hearing a lot about military and having a lot of exchanges or transactions that are in relation to military, armed forces, guns, wars. That's why we're in the era that we're in today.
Thank you very much, Desire. Let me bring in Mr. Kisitu. Mr. Kisitu, you've heard the President of America saying America will not fight wars for countries. Rather, they will help them to be able to defend themselves. What is your take about the point that the Afghanistan people seem to be coming to Uganda, and yet to many of the people think that Uganda has a lot of problems that they can cover up by themselves, other than bringing more people that will occupy and take the resources that we have. What's your take about that, Mr. Kisitu?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I remember my teacher of history sometime back. He told me that history, by definition, is the study of past events in relation to the present to predict the future. Right now, let us first of all move a few footsteps behind. I remember Uganda getting its independence, past president being Mutesa II, and Prime Minister being Bote. Is it so? Hope it is so. Then, as time went on, after a few years, not even making 5, Obote, the Prime Minister, plotted a plan of killing the first president of Uganda, Mutesa. And we understand he died in England, and everyone knows that. But it was the plan put up by Obote. The major controllers of Uganda were not happy with that move. What happened next? They allied with Amin, and Amin took over power. As the president Obote was very busy addressing Chogam by that time in Singapore, and I think he was the guest speaker of the day. He was very busy speaking, and he was known for being a fluent speaker of a foreign language, that is English. The gentleman took over power in Uganda. He controlled the country for over 9 years. But what put everything into total mess, it was the day he decided to chase away all the Indians. Remember that he had a scuffle with Israel. That is Israel. He had them in Uganda. They had come in Uganda, and he took over them. Forcefully controlled them, and the outside world was not happy. Consequently, in 1979, they supported the coming back of Obote too, because Amin had violated the international agreement of harboring every person, either being a Ugandan or a non-Ugandan in the country, treating them the same. But Amin violated it by chasing away all of those ones who are not Ugandans, to let them go back to their countries. Some of them lost their lives. Some of them, they tried to make sure they can look like black people so they can stay. But again, he did not stay in power like how he had planned. Then that made the bring back of Obote II to control Uganda. Remember that the whites always want, they claim that they want democracy. But in actual sense, they want to be with someone who will 100% implement what they want. And everyone should understand that. And then when the gentleman came into power, we experienced the rigging of votes. He came back and was like, let us have the peaceful transfer of power. He organized the elections. Well, I remember very well, Semoga winning as the president of the Democratic Party. And the gentleman was like, no, it is UPC headed by Obote being the winner. And the whites were against that. And by that time, his regime had a lot of problems, not having even money to pay the public servants. To the extent that around time when he was campaigning, he instructed the soldiers that I cannot give you a gun and again I give you money. Use the gun that you have, that is what it means. Use the gun to get money. Roadblocks were everywhere. And I understand the moderator by that time, you were there. Personally, I wasn't there. I'm reading these things that I'm telling you. Today, and actually, what they did, the Americans, those people, the British, they supported President Museveni to fight against what they called the dictatorial regime. And the difference between the history I've told you and what we are seeing currently is that the other regime used to do things in the broad light. The current regime is trying to make itself being so good, but doing things behind the curtains. I would say that everyone who will go against the instructions of the master, the controller of the world, will all not stay in power. Still, to tell you what is happening, what is existing currently, is that what happened in Tanzania? The person who opposed the COVID-19 instructions as given by the controllers of the world, who are very well known, the Americans, Magufuli, is not to be seen. Again, we had the death of another president of Africa who again was against that. The name has gone out of my head. I don't know whether you can remind me. Was it? Was just killed, by the way. Was just killed. And
there is a president of okay, go ahead.
The name has just gone out of my head. Then was also killed because of violating the laws of COVID-19 and so on. Now, President Museveni is in Uganda. The rule is, the instruction is, please receive this number of Afghans, put them in Uganda. And this person is clearly implementing what we studied in history, the divide and rule policy. Divide and rule. This person is the Biden president of America is trying to make himself so smart that we are giving out ammunition, we are giving out the foreign aid in terms of training their armies such that they can fight their wars, which was being set by them. And Biden and America becoming the winners at the end. If you look at the politics of Africa, the way how things are traversing, America is at the center. Look at this again by looking at history. Let us start from the 1945, the World War. That's when it ended. We had the Eastern and the Western Bloc. The Eastern Bloc, who were those at the bloc? America, Britain, France, Italy. Those are the countries right now which are controlling us, which are giving us instructions. But who is being put at the forefront? It is America. And now I'm saying that refugees coming in Uganda, it is the instruction of the Americans. Giving aid to Uganda as a result of it being the major accommodator and the major country that accommodates more of the refugees. That money will go to the refugees, not Ugandans. And Uganda will not benefit anything, but rather the person controlling the country will benefit, they'll support him at one point. That is why I would conclude that the refugees will always be treated so well than the local Ugandans. And by the way, we should also note this, that one refugee is far better than 10 indigenous Ugandans. Why? The government sees nothing from the owners of the country, and it receives a lot of financial support. A lot of finance is coming from the controller. It receives itself strengthening and being in power for as many years as it wants, as long as it has implemented the foreign instructions. And the Afghans coming in Uganda, I would say, Uganda will not gain anything in terms of improving the welfare of the indigenous Ugandan. Just speaking today, will not get anything. But the president controlling and his regime will always be praised by those, most especially in the Eastern Bloc, those countries that are mentioned, as being the major peacekeeping body in Uganda. And still, the moderate and the viewers and our viewers or the listeners, I would say, we've had refugees from Congo. What have we benefited? Has the welfare of the commonwealth improved, yes or no? If the answer is yes, then I would be so wrong. But if the answer is no, I would stand to be very right. We had refugees from Sudan. What I remember that they did very well in Uganda is coming in Uganda here, killing our very Ugandans. I remember the person I'll never forget. It was actually named as, the nickname was Master Blaster, being killed by, is it a Sudanese or a Somali man around Chisenyi in Kampala? Killed, and the government didn't do anything about that. And we didn't get reports if they did something. We didn't get the reports. They come in Uganda, they own the country. You, the owner of the country, you don't appear to be anywhere. Still, we've had very many refugees from all over the world. As the welfare of the common Uganda improved, the issue is that taxes are just increasing, to the extent that even the poor Ugandans who are renting today, there is rental tax, which is very okay. But the government should try as much as it can to cater for the welfare of its people, rather than going to dance on the tune of our colonial masters. Thank you so much. I beg to submit.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kisitu. Thank you very much. I'll ask my producer to put a number where our viewers can go through to send messages and also calling on it so that you can be able to participate in this important show discussion. Desire, when you look at, we have discussed the monetary and the political gains of the government when it comes to the refugees. Can you also indulge a little bit in a discussion of the social impact of these refugees that come in Uganda?
Of course, one of the things that we're going to see socially is, first of all, a clash. There's always going to be a clash of cultures, or the social is you're going to see it in the politics and the economics, but also in terms of socially we haven't had, first of all, where these incoming refugees are going to be resettled, on whose land, in what communities, what schools are they going to be attending or going to? Because first of all, we have Bonaba Some, we all know that, but also socially has this even been communicated socially to infiltrate? They do say that it's temporary, but in terms of socially is, how do the people know what is actually happening, or what it means, or what's going to happen? Has the communication happened between the government agency and people? Because it's the government says we're going to bring in, or we're accepting to have 2,000 refugees from Afghanistan, but actually the people are the ones who are going to receive 2,000 refugees from Afghanistan. All those ministers are going to be living in Kololo and enjoying their life as it should be. The social burden all the social outcomes are yet to be seen, but also lie in the hands of the Ugandans who are socially going to be interacting with these individuals on a day-to-day basis. And also, this is something that we as Ugandans hadn't seen yet, or us Ugandans living, some of us Ugandans living in this era haven't seen it yet, because the last time this happened was when the British brought over the Indian coolies to build the railway. And we all saw what that led to and what happened socially. Again, we live in a very racialized world, and I'm just getting from what happened during when the Indian coolies were left by the British and what that colonial template left. You again saw a hierarchy created just based off of people's physical appearance. So that is something socially that struck out of my mind. First of all, is how would that template accommodate, especially knowing the leaders that we have today, and how is that even going to be different from what we saw with what happened with the Indian coolies and British rule, because we're still on that same tone.
Yes, we have a caller. Let's have a caller. Yes, caller.
Now, this is Nurse. I'm in Spain. So,
yes, go ahead.
You know, first of all, this country is a joke. I don't mean Spain, Uganda. Uganda is a joke. The whole Uganda now is a joke. Which is a pity. Because you see this thing of the refugees coming into Uganda, it is a sensitive matter, and it is something that calls for attention. But when you see the parliament has not come up to talk about this thing, I've not had any member of parliament talking about this thing. I've not had. The things I see on social media are people just trying to make fun out of it. But if you look into the deeper thing, the deeper meaning of those refugees, I'm not saying that refugees should not come to Uganda, but these are the people who put on bombs. And I'm not saying that they are the ones that can, but among the people that are coming, of course, the wrong ones are going to be there. How is the security of Uganda? Because Museveni doesn't care about the Ugandans. What he cares about is he earning out of it? How is his name outside? Because now he's trying to rectify his name, because his name was being tainted under the human rights something. So now he's trying to come up again, to raise up. So when that issue came, he stood up first and said, let them come to Uganda. But he doesn't know how Ugandans are going to be treated by them, because even people in Uganda are now suffering for the resources. So now put 2,000 refugees in Uganda. How is the situation going to be? Whereby a Ugandan is seeing less compared to a refugee. And the whites are happy because the whites want someone who they can use as their puppet. Because first of all, Museveni is gaining money from it, and he is getting guns to kill Ugandans, because that's what he does. It's not hidden anywhere. That's what he does. He's ruling the country under fear, which is a pity. It's a really big pity. I'm so I don't know. Sometimes I sit down and I cry, because Uganda is a joke and no one is coming to talk about it. Even people, they are just making fun out of it, but they don't know the consequences of bringing those refugees. Why did they go to any other Asian country? Why do they have to come to Uganda, really? Why? Whereby they can't even speak the language that you speak. They don't even, English. So Museveni doesn't care about Uganda. This guy just sold out the country. Doesn't care. I'm so much for this. No, I can't talk for the day about this topic. But let me stop there for other callers to call in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your participation. Mr. Kisitu, if you look at the situation that we have, Desire has been trying to, look at the social point of view. When you look at one, they are totally different people all over. And when you look at what is really happening, they are, one, Muslims, as you know. Two, they are of a Persian race. Three, they live in a country that is totally different in comparison to how we are right now. I mean, how Uganda looks like. And 4, you can look at even the eating habits, or the whatever. What do they eat? What are their dishes and all that? And 4, they are saying that they are going to put them in Namboli, and you know the function of Namboli as a social functional infrastructure where we have games and all that. Can you talk about the problem that we have in relation to social dimension when we bring in the Afghani refugees, Mr. Kisitu?
Thank you so much, the moderator. I would say that actually the effects of 3 types, not only social, though you're centralizing basically on it. We have social, political, and economical. The social, I will divide it. I will divide it into 2. The short run and long run. In the short run, you're going to see a lot of mistrust and suspicion between the Ugandans, native Ugandans, and the Afghans themselves. No one will be trusting the other. We know Afghans as people of a heroic nature. And Uganda, we are known to be people who are so hospitable. People are just making fun about this. But the reality is, in the short run, we are going to have a lot of mistrust and suspicions. Still, social point of it, we will see the emergency of new infections that we've not had in Uganda, have been affecting them at both sides. I don't know. In Uganda, we have mosquitoes, and actually, I would say mosquitoes in Uganda, I think they are a normal thing. To Afghans, mosquitoes maybe they will be a new thing to them. Now they will be so much affected. Looking at Nambole, where they are going to be put, Nambole, that is Boyogere, Chireka, down there it is a swamp, a place which is actually near swamps again, and you expect them to be affected by malaria still in Uganda. Still, COVID-19 in Uganda, we had this second wave that we are just living as I speak. It was as a result of the Indians who were allowed to come in Uganda, and they came with a new variant, which has affected us, the Ugandans, greatly. And it was as a result of the government of Uganda, with its foreign policy of accepting them to come back in Uganda, not being checked very well, with variant that is very, very dangerous and so disastrous. We don't know. We are now predicting the 3rd wave, which is going to be very dangerous. Still, in the short run, we will see a 3rd dangerous COVID-19 wave in Uganda, which will affect us the more. Because most of the Ugandans, actually the whole population, I would say, in Uganda has not yet been fully vaccinated, and we are bringing in other foreign people. So socially, in the short run, you will see that. Still, in the short run, I don't know, Afghanistan, the new government that is coming in, I don't know what are its intentions. The new government that will come in, what will be the relationship between it and Uganda? Don't you think that they would again like to retaliate against those ones in Uganda that have tried to seek for refugee in Uganda, for asylum in Uganda? Don't you think that the government would like to revenge against those ones, which will again lead to the loss of the lives of the common Ugandan who knows nothing about the Afghans coming in Uganda? In the long run, socially, you would see people coming together. After, the Afghans will not stay at Nambole for so long, because again they will need to work, they will need to have businesses, and you'll see them interacting. You would see the economic activities at one point improving if all goes well, and people, the Ugandans, earn some good money. Ugandans, we have got people who are very clever, and if the Afghans are not all that very brilliant, they'll face it in Uganda here. And them becoming so much bright, it is as a result of being tortured by the government, and the Ugandans try to become very much creative. And they will see the creativity coming in from the Ugandan side. The political part of it, America will again continue to support the regime, which will, at the political wing, still try to treat, to pamper so much these refugees in Uganda at the expense of the local Ugandan. And you will see America talking good about Uganda, and the president, you will see him again reading votes coming into power again. You will see that all his decisions will be followed in as far as the political part of it is concerned in Uganda. So, in as far as the effects of refugees coming in Uganda, the social part of it, as I conclude, the refugees will stay peacefully in Uganda if they're not attacked by the country where they have come from. But the common Ugandan, the welfare will remain as it is. In the figures, they will show you that the GDP has improved as a result of the foreign aid that we have received, with which man has been used to do ABCD, but in actual sense, the welfare will not remain as improved. Thank you so much, the moderator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kisitu. You have put a very good analysis about the Taliban. Desire, when we look at the security point of view, the Taliban seem to be, where these people are coming from, seem to be very, very dangerous kind of, when it comes to the race, they are Persians, and history tells us the Persians are the most, extremists. If you look at them in Iran and all those parts where they seem to be the most dangerous in terms of fighting, in terms of violence, and in terms of everything. And here comes a situation that, the Taliban have been harboring right from some time back, like 20 years ago. They've been harboring terrorists. And even Osama bin Laden was being harbored down there in Afghanistan by the Taliban. And actually, that was the reason why the America came in and fought them, because of the September 9 bombing. Don't you think if the Taliban see that Uganda is hosting many of its citizens, we might have that kind of attack. We might have that threat as well, and this will affect the whole Ugandans.
Not at all. I don't think that the Taliban or the Persians are inherently violent, because that's a rhetoric that has been fabricated and has been made by the American regime. Because if we look at, first of all, why the Taliban exists because, first of all, let's trace this back to Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was recruited by the Americans in order to invade Iraq. But then how it ended up with Saddam Hussein being caught as a terrorist and killed in America on Eid. So it's this idea of the biggest aggressor and terrorists, I believe, from my understanding and reading of news and articles, has been the American government. And because of this, it has created rhetoric such as Islamic extremism or Islamic terrorists, or even just, for example, if we look at our forefathers when they were fighting for independence, they are written on as they've been rewritten into history as either docile or just massively aggressive. So I do not think that there is a threat of the Taliban not the Taliban, sorry, excuse my language, the Afghanis who are coming to Uganda. I do not think that they actually have a huge security threat to Uganda. I think the problem is, because I believe that we can live in harmony with anyone that would move into Uganda, but our problem is the system that is in place does not guarantee for that harmony. The system that is in place, that is headed by the despot and that is encouraged by countries such as, and supported by all these imperialist countries, does not give us that security. Will allow for these rhetorics to continue, such as Islamic terror or Islamic extremism or Islamic tyranny, because that is the rhetoric that they use to enter country to fight for humanitarian rights. So the question that I will leave today, of which I think this is our question of security, as not only Ugandans, but as Africans in general. The question of security is, this campaign started out with, we're going to show the world what Uganda is. Tugenda balabisa was the rhetoric, and Uganda decides was the slogan. And we're removing a dictator. That one has already been proved to not have come. but then Uganda has still not decided anything in terms of the people. But then the biggest question for me that remains is, can we actually depend on the world that we've shown that Museveni is a dictator to act, or should we? I feel that we're at a place where we also need to hold that world accountable, where it's no longer us showing the world the situation of turmoil that Uganda is in, but that world, we need to come to a realization as Ugandans that we should check that world as well. So in terms of the issue of security, the issue of security will always be the main threat to our security is the Museveni regime and its allies, such as the Americans, the British, the Israelites. Those are our security threats, not refugees from Afghanistan.
Yes, thank you very much, Desire. Mr. Chisitu, if we can have you once again as wait for the other callers. When you look at what is really happening in Uganda, we seem to be, people seem to be very excited over their coming, and many people were even thinking about marrying their women and all that stuff. It has been trending too much on the social media, and people have put it in form of joke. And yet, when you look at the threat that might come with these people, would you please also discuss this, whether there is, you think there is any threat that might come up with them?
Yeah, thank you so much, the moderator. I would say that the Afghans coming in Uganda, looking at the security of the country, the question is the relationship between Uganda and Afghanistan. What are the aims of the new government that is taking over power in Afghanistan in relation? What are their policies, foreign policies, in relation to those of Uganda? Still, if the policies are matching, then I would say that they would be in harmony in country Uganda, because Uganda is not segregative as such. Uganda is made up of people who are very much holistic, people who will always welcome everyone. But the question will come from the differences, the question of insecurity will come from the differences in the objectives, the foreign policies between Uganda and the new government that has come in. Still, the other question, who are those that are coming in Uganda? Yes, the Afghans as we speak. Who are those? Are they people who have been in government, or they are the common people who are seeking for asylum? That is the other question. If we are giving asylum to those the government has been always looking for, always, that actually the common people, those who have taken over power, have been fighting against, then you would expect the extrajudicial killing when they come in Uganda. But if it is these other common Afghans, then you don't expect anything in return. Looking at this comment, actually I call it comment, I call it on social media, what people are talking about, men are saying that they're going to marry off those Afghan ladies and so on. That is what they would say. The government has put it everywhere. For the first time, we have seen Ugandans making comment about the refugees. But previously, refugees have been coming in the country, and we have not been paying a lot of attention about them. By the way, let us ask ourselves again, how comes that the issue of Afghans has sounded a lot on social media in Uganda? Why? Is it the first time that Uganda has hosted refugees? Why is it that almost everywhere in Uganda knows that Afghans are coming, yet we had Sudanese in Uganda as refugees? No one has been talking about that on social media. We've had those from Congo. No one has been talking about that. Somalia coming in Uganda and other countries. Then there should be something behind this. Why? Again, on social media. Actually, I think by putting it on the social media that everyone should make fun about it, they are trying to divert us from very and most important issues to making the Ugandans look at social media, marrying off the word, making comment about that. By natural sense, they will not make the things they're making comment of, they're not being implemented as we think. But security-wise, Uganda government must make sure that it protects the country, and again, it looks into the issue of why are they coming, who are those coming. Why is answered yes, the places that their country is insecure, but what is the take of the new government in Afghanistan in relation to this of Uganda? The caller talks about the issue. Why are they not discussing about this in Parliament? Yet it is a very burning issue. I was listening to I was watching actually General J.J. Odong, the Minister of is it Foreign Affairs? I don't know. Is it Security? I think. It was like was
Minister,
asking the
I
very
think
question that the callers
Minister of
asked.
Security or Defense.
The defense was asked the very question that the callers just posed, and it was like, this is an emergency. According to the laws of Uganda, he called it something somewhere that the government has the mandate of handling the emergency and it reports later. That is the response that he gave out to the public, because we also had the similar questions. And the thing is that they are having talks, the roundtable negotiations of how those problems come in Uganda. So we are just watching the clock. We are just waiting to see what will happen. But they must be very much calculative in making this move. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Let's have a voice that is from the producer, and then we go ahead. Mr. Producer, can you give us the voice note, please? As we wait for the voice, some voices, Desire, as we try to wind up the show, there is a very ongoing discussion on platform, especially people tend to get excited over things that are really not really pressing when it comes to pertinent issues in Uganda, and they leave those that are. Do you think it's intentional by the government to push in such things that would be able to attract or put away people's attention over some important issues that might be happening?
Yeah, I think the miseducation of the masses, and by the masses I mean all of us people every day, the lack of newsworthy information, the removal of critical analysis and critical thinking, it just makes a person so easy to rule over. I think the masses being able not to interpret, articulate, or inform each other, just the lack of political consciousness works in the benefit of such a gruesome regime such as Museveni. So it's not by surprise. It's not by surprise. I grew up watching theater in Uganda, and it was a very powerful thing back in those days, because through theater, leaders were held accountable and critiqued. But over time, it became highly comical, and it changed from satire to just comedy, to pastime. And then all of a sudden the theater crashed in Uganda, and we have none of that. And that's in coordination with also that department crashing at Makerere. So these things are not by surprise, whereby the whole music industry is useless now. A music industry where they would sing songs that brought the masses together. But now the music industry doesn't function unless you take a picture with Salim Saleh, you know. So what we're seeing in Uganda, and I think just people's response online comes out of people finding a way to cope with it through irony or by making a joke out of it. But it's a very serious tactic that is used by governments such as Museveni to make sure that people don't wake up, people don't become politically cautious, and people just stay within that limbo of helplessness. It takes away what misinformation like that takes away the information that people could equip themselves with to a discovery that we're not helpless, where we can fight, we have right, and our dignity is owed to us, and we are the ones to demand for it within this regime. So yeah, I'm not surprised to the response, but also the response is inherently made to look like that.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Desire. We have one of the feedbacks from some of our people watching, saying that I have no problem. That is Hasia, saying that I have no problem with the refugees, but how are we going to differentiate between the good and the bad? Is there a criteria they can use to follow up on this? So people are very much concerned about the people that might come in. They might be having their own other problems when it comes to in terms of behavior, in terms of manners, and all that. I mean, so we don't have much answers for that because we all are trying to anticipate. So I think we have another caller. Let's have a caller, and then after that, we shall try to wind up. Yes, caller. Yes, caller.
Yeah, my name is Ra. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
No? What I'm saying is that what exactly is going on in Uganda on the 12 sides that we have a weak parliament? How is it possible that they could allow one man to take such a big decision for the entire country?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, they are going to Desire and Mr. Kistu are going to answer you up.
Bye for now.
Do we have another caller? Okay, I think we cannot go beyond this. It seems like we are caught up by time. If we don't have any other caller, I would request Mr. Kisitu, would you please wrap up and say anything to us, to our viewers, and as we try to. Mr. Kisitu.
Yes, please.
Can you please wrap up?
Okay. To all our viewers, I'd like to tell you that we need to pray for our country, Uganda. We need to make sure that in everything that we do, we ask God to provide us with leaders who will always have the feeling of the Ugandan, the indigenous Ugandan, the poor Ugandan. If we continue staying with the people who will always respect it, who will always treat, who will always favor, who will always pamper the visitors more than the people staying in their home, that is the more we shall continue to suffer. And still, I would tell every other Ugandan to make sure in your different areas where you stay, make sure that you try as much as you can to tell your friends, our fellow Ugandans, the very good things, like the very good information that we need to hear. The way forward, what we need to do, such that we can live in a very peaceful Uganda. The more we continue to stay with people who are just forcing themselves to be in the driving seat, the more we shall continue to suffer. Our welfare, to all our viewers who are not in Uganda, the welfare of Ugandans is poor. People in Uganda are suffering. The education is now down. And actually, Mr. Moderator, another very big question of discussion. What is the way forward for the education sector in Uganda? If up to now, we even don't know when children will go back to school. The minister is just actually the Minister of Education. I remember listening to what he was talking about. She was talking about. She was like, she's so much happy towards those parents who are planning to take back their children, the girl children who got pregnant and they feel like after giving birth they'll go back to school. Looking at a person giving us such a reasoning, sincerely, we need to pray for our country, Uganda. Remember, education is at the back of everything. I beg to submit. Thank you so much for the opportunity
Yes, Mr.
granted.
Kisitu, before
I'll
you
be
go
waiting
away,
to be on the same platform when given.
Mr. Kisitu, before you go away,
Yes,
I
please.
wonder whether you have heard about Uganda Federal Consultative Council, where we are trying to have all people on board to discuss issues pertaining Uganda as a whole, trying to develop a template for Ugandan governance. And we are trying to have all people that feel like they need to be part of us to write to our email address, and I request the producer to put our email address for UFCC and be able to participate in this very important kind of conference. What do you have to say? It's a federal consultative council. People are looking forward to joining and having a federal system of governance.
Yeah, that is very good. That is very okay. I think that will be the best platform of how we can share the ideas of how we can even reach to the level of writing up journals. We supply them, people read them out, having a number of conferences, and we try to inform our fellow Ugandans of what good governance is and what is within good governance. What is your role if you are to have the good governance? And everyone should know that good does not lie in the hands of the individuals, but it lies in the hands of everyone. Good governance is a contribution of everyone. So it is so good idea. I've not heard about. I had not heard about it before, but I beg to have the email such that I can be part of this when the chance comes.
Yes. We thank you very much, Mr. Kisitu. It was a pleasure talking to you, though we had some challenges with the video as we try to diagnose a lot of issues that have been trending in Uganda. Thank you very much. Our esteemed viewers, we had many guests today, but we had challenges with the network in Uganda, and that's why Mr. Kisitu hasn't been able to be seen on video. And we had also Council Isaac Semakade, who was supposed to be with us, and he had been having trouble with his network. I wonder whether Mr. Semakade, we can hear you now. Council Semakade, can we hear you? Yes, I think unfortunately we can't hear him, as at least he would have said hi to us, and then possibly we plan to have him next weekend as we try to analyze a lot of other issues. Desire, let's conclude this show.
Me now?
Yes, can we hear you? Do you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Yes, Mr. With Council.
I listened in when Desire was submitting. I am very touched to hear somebody so passionate, so articulate, so eloquent, speaking from the heart and speaking to our heads as well. I am sorry I missed, but I think everything I had to say, I've had it verbalized and vocalized through Desire's submissions, for at least the part I listened to. I only want to say that this is a good initiative. Let's continue it. I hope I can be with you next time. There is a wave of change that is coming. It needs your leadership. Truthfully, like Desire has submitted, there has been a freezing of all potential tributaries of reason, of energy, of a new direction. So we are at a crossroads where meaningful change is going to come from an eruption, and there's nothing beautiful about that. Sincerely, we have to manage the process. It's we have to work doubly hard. I want to stop at this. Thank you very much.
Yes, for those who don't know Council Isaac Semakade, he's a very, very renowned human rights activist in Uganda, and we're very unfortunate today that we didn't have him. He's a very renowned human activist, and he has dedicated his 10-year career fighting for fundamental rights and with a lot of vigor. We would love to have him on this platform on this platform, our TV show next weekend, and I hope he will be able to, discuss a lot. Mr. Council Isaac, if you can give us around 5 minutes as we try to conclude on this show. We had a very pertinent discussion regarding the coming in of refugees in Uganda from Afghanistan.
Yes.
And actually, when you look at, we want you to give us the legal point of view in terms of what is the government, what would the president do to make it legal? Because now the parliament is complaining that it has not received any kind of communication about it, and actually other stakeholders seem not to be aware of what is going on. Would you give us the legality of all these kind of directions?
From a strictly legal perspective, we are on a technically gray area. Refugee law is a creature of international law, and international law has made all boundaries of democratic societies open for refugees to access. It is not just immoral, but it's also unjust and unlawful to lock boundaries to refugees. So that's the international framework which was agreed upon painstakingly many years ago. And irrespective of the waves of nationalism that are blowing through Europe and now America and elsewhere, even in Australia, I guess, the principle of international law, I believe, to which our country, Uganda, is also a state party, is that we should do all that we can within our means to accommodate the processing of refugees. Well, but the reality on the ground is that we have paid lip service to our obligation as a host nation. So much of our refugee policy is devoid of a democratic content, in the sense that democratic institutions of Uganda are being bypassed. Our refugee policy is now largely dictated by imperialist forces, as your pre-current speakers brought that very well. It is also not fair for those who hold executive authority to abuse it by bypassing democratic checks and balances and representing a foreign policy that isn't organically built from Uganda. We haven't assessed. We have hosted nearly 2 million refugees in the last 5 years, and we haven't assessed its impact. Whether we can receive more from a country like Afghanistan, moreover at the request of an imperial invader who caused the mess there. I think Ugandans need to express themselves on this. But again, from a strictly legal perspective, I think we must defend the right of democratic institutions of Uganda to express themselves on that. Whichever way that yields, that should be the position of the law and the politics. What do I think personally? I sympathize with Afghans. I just I sympathize with those that feel that they have to leave. Anybody that feels that they have to leave a country really attracts sympathy. So, irrespective of the situation of bad governance we're having now, I don't think the element of sympathy for our brothers and sisters from Afghanistan should be lost in the cacophony of our politics. A more broad view has to be taken. This has been the consensus of those that have ruled Uganda for a very long time. And I think I'm not qualified to see it from a historical perspective. There are more able speakers in that regard. But I think Ugandans should be heard. That's the point that is worth defending at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, I would like you to discuss a little bit of we've been talking about the president's speech when he made a twist turn by condemning security brutality and abuse of human rights, because I know that's your area of operation. What is your take? Was the president speaking it out of his I would say empathetic element part of it, or he was after something that he wanted to gain possibly from international organizations?
Yes, it is true the president was posturing. He was speaking tongue in cheek. He was speaking, I think the English word is out of turn or out of phrase. He wasn't addressing a Ugandan audience. It was, again, him playing his geopolitics and appeasing his imperialist puppet masters. That's a given. But there are important concessions that the president made, important relations that we are missing. For instance, the president revealed that he had his SFC to wear police uniform and conduct run operations. This is a very important point. People are missing it. This man, either through age or dementia or recklessness, is doing things, and that thing has been missed. So that speech, we are trying to look for it everywhere. We can't find it. We can't find it on the South website. I hope you recorded it. Please, it has to be studied, because it's an important concession that there has been subversion of the police force by this creature. His own personal army is wearing police uniform and conducting missions which are not sanctioned by police command. And now we see what the person he sent is dead. These things are not isolated events. So, to what extent did the deputy IGP, who was the IGP, have command? To what extent did he command if he has people above him running missions that are not sanctioned by? What extent is the police leadership uneasy with the president, and why did the president feel that he had to come and lambast them in public like an ineffective headmaster? Yet you could summon them and speak to them as security chiefs. Why did he feel that he had to lambast them, and then suddenly somebody collapses and they said he followed the chair? The sequence of events is itself quite interesting. I don't want to go much, but that's the point I wanted to stress on that in the limited time possible.
Thank you very much, Council. And finally, we also discussed an issue concerning about peacekeeping force in Somalia. And we seem to be having a lot of, amongst all the players, we have the highest number of AMISOM members, and will have lost the biggest number of casualty there. Do you think the president is doing it in matters of humanitarian, or it's on financial or monetary gain?
No, for sure, our presence in Somalia is as a mercenary force. If ever there were any pacifist intentions orchestrated at African Union level, those cease to matter, because we now know much more than we knew before. The narrative that Al-Shabaab were so evil, they were fronting for Al-Qaeda and for jihad and so on, it was too seductive. But with the passage of time, we now know better. Thanks to what has happened in Afghanistan, we know that if without these forces, Al-Shabaab would be the legitimate government with 48 hours. So whatever missions we are doing there, we are trying to hold up the sky. But I think the sky won't fall if we left. I don't buy into that logic. It's a matter of time, and I think we have to recraft a new foreign policy beyond Museveni and Musevenism and his expeditions. Yeah, that's what I have to say on that.
Okay, thank you, Council Semakade, for your insight, and we really appreciate your time. And actually, despite of the challenges, you've been able to run up and down and be able to have at least some few words that are really touching, and everybody's so excited to have you back on this platform or this program. We wish we could have you another day, and we try to make another diagnosis of issues that really need to be put in our hands or our heads in. Thank you very much. We hope you can have the last words and say bye-bye to our viewers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and thank you very much, the viewers and listeners. May God bless you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, finally, Desire, would you please wrap up your words, and then I finally speak out to our viewers and say bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everyone who's been on the panel. Thank you so much, Dr. Juko, always for coordinating this. As I leave, one thing that is very apparent and stays apparent, and the one reason why we're here, so that we do not forget why UNN is here, why this platform was formed, is so that it equips us with knowledge. The more we know, the better we can fight. Know your enemy, going to sleep knowing your enemy. Let us master our enemy and what their interests are, so that we know who we're fighting. And the enemy we fight has no conscience. Therefore, we must be ready for these battles that are yet to come, and let us remain educating ourselves and other people as well that we meet that are in our circles, because ignorance and laziness will catch us dead and will bring our coffins closer.
Thank you very much, Desire. Thank you very much. We cannot go beyond this time, as we always, our best enemy is time. So therefore, we very much thank you for this wonderful show, our guests, and also thank our viewers for the time that you always spend looking at what we are really about to give you. And we also appreciate the money that you put in to buy data so that you can be part of our discussion. And those who call, we always appreciate. We just want to remind you that Uganda is our country, and we always do the best to make sure that we really make Uganda the best place for us to live in. We would also love to take our viewers that, as a matter of fact, UFCC, we are still receiving people that are ready to participate by putting in their expertise and also bring in that knowledge and experience that really deserves our platform, our council. Therefore, we want you to write to us and tell us your interest, and then we'll be able to, receive and also call back or take back reply to you and tell you when we shall be having the first conference. We cannot go beyond that. Don't go away. Please stay on your platform as we bring more of the programs that we have this evening, as Mr. Gombia and Principal will be coming over next. And please continue with the discussion and share all our videos so that everybody can be able to receive them and also comment on them. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. See you then next week as we again indulge in the more discussion of training issues. Thank you. Have a blessed day. Have a blessed night. And have a blessed week come tomorrow. Thank you.